Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, the special Magna Carta edition. So, on this day, about 800 years ago, Magna Carta was signed by the infamous King John, which bound him to recognize the rights and liberties of freeborn Englishmen. Now, that's very important to us here on Taking Liberties because we do like to take liberties. Here today, for this episode, we have Austin joining me from Sydney.
Oh,
Zeev from Melbourne, who I'll be joining tomorrow,
Greetings.
and Lee from Perth.
Yes. Hello.
And I'm Vicus. We're signing in from where civil liberties come to die, aka Canberra. So, I believe we'll start off with a poem which Austin has just been ranting on and on about.
just the end of a poem by Kipling. And still when mob or monarch lays too rude a hand on English ways, the whisper wakes, the shudder plays, across the reeds at Runnymede, and Thames that knows the mood of kings, and crowds and priests and such like things, rolls deep and dreadful as he brings their warning down from Runnymede.
That
Okay.
was amazing. Yeah. So, basically, the significance of this day is that a bunch of wealthy landowners in UK kind of got sick of a king that was basically asserting divine rule to just overrun their right to property, overrun their right to basically their own income, and basically revolted, resulting in what led to a little bit of a
Civil War.
yeah.
There was a civil war, and John capitulated and signed a treaty, which he later sought to cancel. And basically, the treaty had more than a few parts. A lot of them were about taxes, because a big thing was how much property this guy was taking from, particularly the nobles. So there were a lot of provisions banning taxes on all kinds of medieval goods, which I really can't recall now. But, you know, obviously a lot of reference to no taxing this kind of agriculture or this kind of...
Pantaloons and tunics
Yeah.
and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
But
By the way,
importantly, yes,
by
there
the way,
was...
I was going to say, if you want to see a really good movie that was made in quite recently, actually, in 2011, I
Yes,
think it
Disney's
was.
Robin Hood.
No, no, not even.
Not quite about the Magna Carta, but
No, no,
about
no, that
Prince
was-
John.
Yeah, no, but
If you must see a movie about Robin Hood, you should see the Disney version. Go on. Sorry.
no,
Not
but I
Kevin
was gonna say,
Costner.
a really good movie that was made, sort of about how King John wanted to undo the Magna Carta, essentially. And it came out in 2011. I think it was called Ironclad, and it had the guy who played John Adams, and I can't remember his name. In the
Paul
history of
Giamatti?
cinemas. Yeah, yeah,
Just like John
Giamatti.
Adams.
Yeah. So it had him playing King John. It was a really good movie, and it's quite historically accurate, because I think it was like in Rochester Castle or something. They actually picked out the castle. They picked out a replica of the castle where this battle actually occurred. So,
Okay. Interesting.
yeah.
So,
So it's
yeah.
very
Um,
good to watch.
I just thought, if we're talking about other things to check out, if you want to look at the Magna Carta, Econ Talk with Russ Roberts, they did a podcast with a guy from the University of East Anglia quite recently, and he also talked about kind of the background and how, a lot with what Zeev was saying, where it was the levy of taxes on estates, and how estates, basically if a noble died, their estate basically went to the king unless there was an adult heir to immediately take it over. Like, essentially the king was the kind of the regent for, the executor for every estate where there wasn't an adult, to inherit. And he basically then took lots of money, it's heavily taxed and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I guess we should talk about kind of the key part about Magna Carta, which for us, in our perspective, is the notion of the rule of law. So I guess the key thing for Magna Carta, I mean, there's lots of provisions, but the one that kind of really became significant, not because of exactly what it said, but kind of what it symbolized, was that the king was subject to the law, that the king didn't have the ability to just kind of do whatever they wanted at any time for any reason, that they actually had to sort of... They were subject to a greater power.
It's not even symbolic. It's quite explicit.
Yep.
Um, one of the provisions of the Magna Carta roughly translates to: no freeman shall be taken, imprisoned, outlawed, etc.
And in no other way
Except
destroyed.
by the except in no other way destroyed, except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. So, the monarch snapping his fingers and saying, "Because I said so," is now no longer the ground for an execution.
Well,
But now it's the
like
president.
Arguably.
I mean, because there's been a lot of writing, particularly like at the moment, and
Unless
I mean,
you
what's been
have
pointed out is that even at the time, it wasn't exactly enforceable. So they say, okay, the law of the land. Well, the king writes the law of the land, so will he? You know, like it. The actual provisions themselves weren't even necessarily that good. Like they, you know, they didn't specify all the terms. You know, so it's only because of the ideas have then been subsequently worked on, and really it was until the 1800s
No.
that we actually we had this
1700s.
entire 1700s. Sorry, 1700s.
Well, look, exactly, and
Yeah.
what you would say is that there's this gradual progression over time, and
Yeah,
the typical English lawyers will then say, well, we now point you to this famous case in the 1700s, Entick and Carrington, famous trespass case.
yeah,
King's ministers rock up at the door of some random publisher and knock over his house looking for some books. They don't have a warrant. The publisher sues for trespass and he wins.
Yeah.
And they say, well, again, if it's not found in the laws, then it's not legal. So the minister
Correct.
just saying, because I feel like it, you should search this house, doesn't actually give him the right to search the house. There has to be some legal authority to do that. And if you flip that back the other way, what it really means is that people are allowed to do everything they want to do in their lives, except things that are specifically forbidden
yeah.
to them.
Yep. I was going to say, what Magna Carta did lead to, and it's interesting because we talk a lot, like a lot of the liberals, a lot of the classical liberals and libertarians in Australia stem from basically the Lockean view of the world. So, you know, tabula rasa, all of these concepts of, you know, rights being inalienable.
Yeah.
All of these things spring from Magna Carta because the Magna Carta was the first sort of binding document that restricted the powers of someone who claimed divine right. Like Steve said, it essentially made it so that the kings couldn't snap their fingers. Unfortunately, though, recent executive recent executive overreaches have resulted in cases where the executive can just snap their fingers and kill people, say with a drone. So,
Well, I mean, I think, like, just to go back to sort of the, like, as you said, Locke as well, but also I think that a big part of it is the American Revolution. So, you know, their rallying cry is essentially that we have these rights that are we're not just inventing them now, but they go all the way back to the Magna Carta. So, you know, Cato's letters and all this sort of stuff, that played a big part in it as well, which is, you know, comes through Locke and, you know, comes through. So I think there's a confluence of things that brings us to kind of the classical liberal tradition we have now. But I think back at the time, that wasn't necessarily as clear. And certainly when, you know, because King John repealed it like the year after, and then it got reinstated, you know, a year after that. Then it was repealed after that, and then eventually, and I think that this podcast, which with Econ Talk, goes into, essentially it became a standard later on by each king sort of reaffirming the Magna Carta. Was kind of, that was the done thing. Like, to show that you weren't going to be a tyrant, you would reissue the Great Charter, you'd get it printed out through the church, and all this sort of stuff. So I think a lot of the Magna Carta is not so much even in it itself, but just the mere concept that divine power is bound by there's, you know, the kings are bound by a higher set of law, and it's not because of the legal standard, but because people believe that it's true. You know, I think that's the real power of the Magna Carta, is that, you know, that we now think there is a limit to power, where back at the time there wasn't. You know, people didn't necessarily believe that, and so I guess that's what I was kind of getting at. Like, and that's, you know, because I mean, what is it? Learned Hand says, you know, when liberty dies in the hearts of men, no constitution can save it. And so I think it's kind of that kind of argument that Magna Carta's its value is in convincing people that the king, that the executives should be subject to the law.
I would argue that its greatest value is as a symbol,
Yeah.
Yes.
more than anything else. Absolutely. Its
I-
greatest value is as a symbol.
I-
And
I-
as the inspiration for the fantastic spin-off show Magnum Carta PI.
So
There's a YouTube series in that. We're gonna crowdsource that one. It's gonna be like the next
that's a good
Kung
point.
Fury.
I'll start up the page at some point.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, so all of us here are within the Anglosphere, which is why
Yep.
Magna Carta is such a big deal. But the reality is, and I think Tom Palmer's made a point about this before, it's that liberty by no means is restricted to the Anglosphere. It's not.
Yeah, sure,
It didn't
yeah.
start in the Anglosphere. But Magna Carta was really the starting point within the Anglosphere.
Yeah, for sure.
The changes
Absolutely.
that came in, for the changes that eventually led to, John Locke, the American Revolution,
Yep.
and so on and so forth, springing all these ideas of,
Running
basic.
all the way up to our own podcast being started.
Yes,
Pretty
that's
much.
it.
Yes.
Trace
Yeah.
that lineage all
We-
the way.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah.
Direct
The future of liberty has been shifted. We are like a rock in the the river of liberty. Once we've gone in there, we've now changed the path of the river.
But see, here's the thing: we know that the ancient Romans also had this similar concept. In fact, the Magna Carta was sort of based on the idea, like Great Charter, Latin. It came like they had this idea in mind, right? That there was a time when the Romans experienced a similar thing, where tyrants would, basically shackling the local population, and shackling the population, and the Romans themselves had basically set up huge and complex political legal systems to try and chain their executive. For example, the dictator, and they called them a dictator, was restricted to 5 years in power.
Yep.
Right. After which, they would no longer be allowed to take power again. Now, the problem with these complex legal structures in Rome was that they got so big, right, that only the political insiders could eventually, figure out how everything was going, and eventually they brought down the entire system. Basically one guy, Julius Caesar, brought down the entire system and made himself dictator for life.
As Tacitus said, corruptissima republica plurimae leges, which roughly translates to, hopefully the English get this one right. There was a big flaw in the Roman Republic, and that's why it became an empire, and why it really did sort of go away from its original fairly liberal roots. It didn't last.
Yeah,
And
actually,
Well,
sorry, go Steve.
Actually, I remember this because when I started playing Rome 2 Total War,
good lord.
There we go.
there were some character names in there that I didn't quite know who they were.
Yes, of course.
And obviously, the next thing you do is go up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Of course.
As one does.
Well, this is why these games have educational value.
Yeah, that's it.
But
So-
moving right.
I was
if
gonna go.
we might from.
I was gonna go into this big thing about how like the Roman Republic essentially started from like the plebeians rising up and like making sure that the patricians wouldn't
I
basically.
thought Russell Crowe was the one who got it back.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
saw that movie
Yes.
too.
Yeah, I
Thank
saw that.
you.
I thought
Well,
Russell
this
Crowe.
is-
And Russell Crowe also played Robin Hood, which brings us back to the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely. So,
sorry,
bringing
go
us forward into modern times, Gillian Triggs has commented that executive overreach is going too far in Australia. And you might say that now is the time to reclaim our rights as found in Magna Carta. We should all take to the streets and, proclaim that our liberties are being infringed upon. But
Can I just say, I am sincerely glad that Gillian Triggs has woken up after what seems to be a 2 and a bit year slumber.
yes,
she's realised-
finally doing her job. It's
Yeah.
amazing what a change of government can do.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the historic example of the American Revolution, I think, is instructive because, really,
Are you
I mean,
suggesting we
no, just well, maybe you'll get that far. But
this is interesting. Keep going.
yeah, no, we got all radical over that. No, just in terms of like, if you look at how the Declaration of Independence came about, there was actually, I think, like 70 or 80, different collective groups. It was towns, or it was cities, or it was unions, or guilds or whatever, where they actually had their own declarations of independence before there was the actual the formal one. So I mean, I think that kind of points to that there was a belief at the time that people should be free. And it wasn't even necessarily everybody understood Locke, everybody read Cato's letters, everybody had a firm sense of theory. I mean, there was I remember hearing about a particular soldier who was interviewed after the War for Independence, and it was almost like Captain America in the first movie, in the first Captain America. He's like, I just don't like bullies. It was something along the lines of, we just wanted to be free. Like, they didn't necessarily, because the guy interviewing was like, oh, have you read Locke? Have you read all the, Jefferson's writings and all this sort of stuff? He's like, well, no, I just, I wanted to be free, and we had to fight, So I think it sort of points to the notion that we actually need to get people in the mindset that freedom is good and freedom works, and just to sort of embody that sense of, well, there's a problem with all these intrusions with the executive power because it interferes with our freedom. And I don't think most people think like that. I think most people kind of are a bit more, to be a bit rough, to slaves to the state. Like, they have this sort of view of government as a good thing, and
Nah, the Australian motto is pretty much "You'll be right, mate." So it's
apathy.
It's apathy.
Exactly. And I guess the first time that this really shocked me was, if you look at this executive overreach, I mean, people now talk about, stripping citizenship away on the basis of suspicion. Well, the people have been deported on the basis of suspicion before, and wrongly so. We had Mr. Hanif, a doctor in Queensland, have basically, his career torn up to shreds and his life for a couple of years at least completely ruined because some minister thought that maybe he was a terrorist. And there was no reason for him to think so other than what?
He was brown. He was brown. You
can't trust he was brown, that's true.
And his cousin, he gave his cousin his SIM card for his mobile phone, and his cousin was a terrorist.
Yeah.
And giving people SIM cards is a terribly, terribly suspicious thing to do.
Especially brown people giving other brown people their
SIM
cards.
Nobody ever gives other people SIM cards.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
very
Like, all those
suspicious.
SIM cards, like, I gave Austin a SIM card the other day, and, all of a sudden, ASIO was like asking...
No, you guys are clearly both terrorists.
Yeah.
That's the conclusion that I've drawn. So the reality is that all of these powers just allow people to act on the basis of suspicion, for example. And suspicion, unfounded belief, well, it's easy to be hysterical when in these kinds of situations. It's very easy to say, better safe than sorry, we're punting him out.
Yep. And actually, I mean, the whole metadata retention thing is all underpinned by the notion that, that suspicion is enough. We don't need to get a warrant to search your private life.
That's
we just
actually
need to...
not true.
Suspicion is...
No. The bill does require the government to get a warrant. It's just the bill also allows a single warrant to cover the entire country.
Yeah, okay. So, basically the government doesn't need a warrant then.
It's a warrant.
Sure.
Yeah, it's technically a warrant. They've just changed the definition of warrant to include unlimited numbers of people.
Okay, well...
Have the most elegant segue ever to our next topic, which I'm going to ruin by prefacing it by telling you it's a segue. But
they're the best segues.
So as we all know, and I've referenced it several times, this is the King John of Magna Carta with the same King John and Robin Hood. And Disney's version of Robin Hood was in fact the best film score. Now, the theme song...
I'm really intrigued to know where this segue is going.
...uses the same riff that was later stolen and used in the Australian hit song Hamster Dance, which you could torrent illegally along with Disney's Robin Hood to compare the two. However, new legislation has recently been passed that may make that more difficult, and I'll allow one of the people who knows more.
I'm going to rename that the Magna Segue. It is the Great Segue. It is circular and large.
I felt like we were playing 6 degrees of separation.
It's the Sunday afternoon drive of segues. Like, we will get there eventually.
But it's all about the journey, guys.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, anyway, that's in that masterful change. Yes. So, I mean, I guess this, in some ways, this kind of points to just the executive overreach, because it's the whole notion that, and like the changing from you can live your life unless we, except for these few things we're going to rule out, to you can't do anything except for these small amount of things you're free to do, and the whole notion is that they want to crack down on piracy, and so they're targeting people through the use of VPNs, and essentially they're doing the bidding of the recording industry and the movie industry in the States.
MPAA. So that's actually my biggest complaint about this. This is essentially a bill that's been written by the MPAA.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone who's not aware of who these people are, they're basically the lawyers. They're the lawyers for those movie companies.
Well, it's the Motion Picture Association of America, so it's the film industry of America, and the RA.
It's not the film.
is the recording industry.
It's the lawyers for the film industry.
Yeah.
Right. The film industry just wants money. Right?
Yeah.
That's their perspective, and this is just a means to an end. However, this bill that they're essentially the most egregious thing I think that's part of this bill is the section that allows an injunction that's written in California. Now, California is an injunction-happy state.
Yeah.
Right? There is no doubt about that. They love to injunct things. They love to bring their entire state to a standstill if they can.
Mm.
Right? An injunction held in California, if this bill is passed, will bind Australia to the same injunction. Now, that's problematic in the sense that, we already have things like parallel import laws, which kind of restrict how quickly Australians get access to digital content. Well, not just digital content, but content in general. Now, with the power of this injunction, they can essentially file an injunction in California, and it'll be bound here. So preventing Australian release. So say if, for example, Netflix gets the go-ahead to release something in Canada, and also releases something in Australia, they can file an injunction in California and block Netflix from showing the show here in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's sort of one of those things where it's a rent-seeking thing. Like, it's just a bad, even though, I mean, you sort of got to wonder, how much of that will actually happen. I can't imagine it happening much. But it's more the precedent of, letting... I mean, really, if you just look at, like, the Mickey Mouse copyright laws, how they extended copyright, and kind of the whole progression of this whole issue is essentially, uncritical governments doing the bidding of special interests.
I need to preface my criticism. My criticism isn't that it stops illegal stuff from happening in the country. My sort of complaint is that it makes it harder to be a legal content user, right? Like, for example, I have a Netflix account. I have, HBO accounts. I like to consume things legally. Huh?
Really?
Yes, really. If content is good, I don't object to paying for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll buy it on Blu-ray when the series is done, if George R. R. Martin survives that long. The point is, I want to make sure I enjoy it before I pay money for it.
Yeah.
But
All right.
I don't actually have that rule, but, to each their own, right? Like, my point is, right, all of these laws make legal ownership harder in Australia, and that's where this entire discussion is going.
How's that? How do they make legal ownership harder?
So, like, in this case, like I said, a streaming company, for example, might have the license to do it in Canada or wherever else, right? But through VPNs. So like, for example, if you connect to Netflix via VPN, like I do to Canada occasionally, right?
Shocking.
Illegal.
Your list of TV shows that's available grows, right?
Yeah.
And that's because the way their technology works is that it looks at where you're coming from. So where the geocode is. Which is perfectly fine, right? I get a slower stream by going through a VPN, which means I don't get to stream in, 1080p from Canada. I only get, standard definition, or if it's a really good link, right, I might get high definition. But at the same time, I'm getting a bigger choice in what I get to watch, right?
You know what that means? According to Senator Bernie Sanders, some child is starving somewhere now because of your increased price.
Vickers, how could you do that to those children? Why would somebody think of the children? Yeah. So keep going, Vickers.
I'm just saying, this is not really illegal.
No.
Right? But they want to criminalize it. Right? And I am illegal. I'm legal in the sense that I'm paying for the service. Right?
You are, but you probably... Netflix doesn't really care, but I bet you they've got a provision there.
Illegal, Vegas.
I bet you that Netflix has got a provision in their terms of service which they don't enforce, which deals with this kind of thing and which forbids it.
It's stupid, but it is illegal.
So it's not a breach of it may not be a breach of any criminal law. It may or may not be. I don't know.
But it's probably a breach of a term of contract.
Yes, with Netflix.
It's illegal for
as a
Netflix
libertarian, you should be ashamed.
Well, so it's actually so what Vickers' point is, I believe, is that this is actually it's illegal for Netflix to sell to him. He's not doing anything except violating the terms of contract, but Netflix is selling to him illegally. So an injunction that is brought against Netflix in California, based on their service of providing it to Canada and being VPN by Australians, could cause them trouble. Is that what you're saying, Vickers?
Yes, precisely.
And I guess the knock-on impact is that all consumers of those sorts of services will pay more because of the increased transaction costs, because they can now have to deal with the potential risk of somebody lodging legal proceedings in another jurisdiction affecting. So I mean, I guess that's in sort of in a roundabout way that will sort of potentially increase the cost on someone like Netflix, but potentially also others. Like there might be startups who might find themselves, and I guess that's what we see in a lot of these sort of copyright and patent kind of things, is you get startups who kind of come up, trying to find their feet, and they just find themselves in an absolute morass of legal hell. And so people just don't do that in the future. They just, consumers have less choice because it's so expensive to get in the game in the first place.
Yeah, precisely. And so basically it's anti-innovative. It's basically, it makes legal ownership harder, which is counterproductive to their claims, right? Like they're saying they want people to buy content, yet they're making it harder.
Yeah.
Now this is the irony of it. I mean, who exactly is winning from all of this? They're actually making it harder for us to buy their product. People are less likely to buy Netflix if Netflix is, it has less content.
Yep.
People are less likely to view all of these shows if it's harder for them to buy it. It's incredible the way in which people in the entertainment industry seem to think that they live on IP laws. They don't.
Everyone
they live on
knows
viewers.
that if you make something illegal, people stop doing it.
Yeah.
So make it more difficult for people to obtain these shows legally. They'll just have to buy it at a higher price from a different vendor.
Yeah.
That's just how markets work. That's why no one can smoke weed anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
Clearly.
Nobody takes drugs. Nobody downloads shows illegally. Absolutely no one.
I mean, I think Gabe Newell
A good
from...
example is from a frequently pirated television show. Murdering a King is definitely illegal in Westeros, which is why it never happened.
Yeah, that's it.
The
That's
law
it.
protects them.
Absolutely.
Not that I would know because I can't legally get paid.
Yeah. I mean, Gabe Newell from Valve, I think he made the absolute definitive comment on this issue, which he says piracy is a customer service problem. Like the reason people pirate is because it's easier. It's because particularly in Australia, somebody's typing or something and they're right in their microphone. Anyway, it's very, they make it very hard. And if you think about Australia, like it's all of a sudden it's become a lot easier because Netflix was coming and everybody's lifted their game. But, go back 3 years and if you want to get legal access to Game of Thrones, you have to go through Foxtel and that's expensive.
And you have to pay $120 for that package.
Yeah.
You know what the price is for that package now? Right?
Don't know.
Okay, it's basically $25.
Yeah.
It is now it is $25 a month if you just want Game of Thrones.
Yeah, okay.
Legally.
Which is still really expensive if you think about it.
It's retardedly expensive. I'd never pay it because HBO is significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
Now, I realize I'm probably doing something illegal there by also going VPNing to, like America.
US.
Get that.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I don't care.
Yeah. And I mean, and I guess the irony in some of this is just the general IP laws probably make it hard for different people to actually provide it cheaply in the first place. Like because of all this legal barrier, they probably have to write 400-page contracts to get access to streaming. Where because just the massive amounts of copyright legislation they need to protect themselves from. So it's one of those things that
partly a product of conservatism in the entertainment industry, in the sense of, well, perhaps no longer now, but it's certainly in the 90s and the early 2000s. The executives there would have been people well on in their age group, but not necessarily internet savvy, and kind of looking at the internet as this kind of lawless Wild West, which they must clamp down on in order for their traditional profitable services, the movies, the cinemas, and so on, to actually make a profit, instead of seeing the internet as a place where they can actually benefit. That's just speculation, but it seems to me as if that's what's going on, and still going on, it seems, to some extent.
I mean, maybe some of it's also a bit like the anyway, yeah, the terms of service with like this thing with Vicus, like, there's this terms and conditions which he has signed saying that he has to be from Canada. They don't enforce it, but they probably want those conditions there anyway, just in case they do want to enforce it. It might be the same with the mountains of legislation they've accumulated. That is, they want it there, just in case they want to enforce it, even if at the time they're thinking we never will. So maybe it's sort of a preventative thing. Sorry, I jumped in. I was going to finish with Zeev, but I didn't get the message till I started talking. Vicus, sorry.
That's
we got a poem. We got a poem here from Austin.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem about the virtues of piracy.
Okay.
Hey ho ho, it's one for all for one, and we'll share alike with you, and love you like a son. We're gentlemen of fortune, and that's what we're proud to be. And when you're a professional pirate, you'll be honest, brave, and free, the soul of decency. You'll be loyal and fair and on the square, and most importantly, when you're a professional pirate, you're always in the best of company. And I'll leave our bravest viewers to find and identify where that poem is from. It's beautiful.
I want to finish off with something else as well. Do what you want because a pirate is free, and you are a pirate. All right, so that's our Magna Carta special episode for today. If you happen to be in Sydney, I believe there's an event of some sort going on.
Yeah, there's an event at the CIS tomorrow night, and just to tie this all together, I would like to say, do you know what a pirate's favorite legal document is? It's the Magna Carta.
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, so,
Austin.
are you going to give any more details than the fact that there is a CIS event? Like
No,
maybe
Google
what page?
CIS Magna Carta. You'll figure it out. You all have the internet. You're all adults. I'm not the government. I'm not your father.
Cool. Well, the other one that's going on, I know, in Melbourne is the Liberty on the Rocks Magna Carta edition. So that's happening in Fed Square, I believe. Beer Deluxe.
Yes, it is. Beer Deluxe. And come down and hopefully have a drink and celebrate freedom.
I'll be there, and I think I'll actually be in a suit this time, so it'll be a bit weird. So if you see the weird guy, that's me.
It's a general rule in life. If there's a weird-looking dude, it's probably Vicus.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's it for this week, and we'll catch you next week where we'll hopefully take some more liberties. See ya.
See ya.